Good morning, dear students. In this video lesson, we are having a discussion on the short story The Fall of the House of Usher, written by Edgar Allan Poe, the American poet and writer. Edgar Allan Poe, the American poet and writer, was born in Boston, Massachusetts, of a couple of traveling actors in 1809. His father deserted him when he was 2 years old, and his mother passed away a year later, means when he was 3 years old. Though he was adopted by John Allen, a rich tobacco merchant of Richmond, he felt emotionally and financially insecure. His foster father constantly reminded him of his own charity that made Poe's life comfortable. Consequently, he broke away from Mr. Allen after the death of his foster mother and Mr. Allen's remarriage. Meanwhile, he had received education in a school in Longland. For a while, he served in the army and worked as a journalist. He married his cousin Virginia C. Lum, who died 10 years later. Poverty never spared Poe, and he even attempted suicide once, though without success. In 1849, he was found dead on the streets of Richmond. Edgar Allan Poe is regarded by many not only as the first American poet, but also as the founder of modern detective stories. He wrote many Gothic short fictions. Gothic fictions refers to a type of fiction which lacks the exotic setting of the earlier romances. And the Gothic fiction develops a brooding atmosphere of gloom and terror that represents events that are uncanny or macabre or melodramatically violent, and often deals with aberrant psychological states. The locale was often a gloomy castle furnished with dungeons. The typical Gothic story focused on the sufferings imposed on an innocent heroine by a cruel and lustful villain, and Gothic fiction made bountiful use of ghosts, mysterious disappearances, and other sensational and supernatural occurrences. The principal aim of such novels was to wake chilling terror by exploiting mystery and a variety of horrors. The Gothic novel was inaugurated by Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, a Gothic story, which was published in 1764. Gothic element is present there not only in the stories of Edgar Allan Poe, but also in his poems like The Raven. The Fall of the House of Usher is a short story by American writer Edgar Allan Poe, first published in 1839 in Burton's Gentleman's Magazine. Then later it was included in the collection Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque in 1840. The short story, a work of Gothic fiction, includes themes of madness, family isolation, and metaphysical identities. Now, while talking about the plot of the short story, The Fall of the House of Usher begins with the unidentified male narrator riding to the house of Roderick Usher, a childhood friend whom the narrator has not seen in many years. The narrator explains that he recently received a letter from Roderick detailing his worsening mental illness and requesting the narrator's company. Out of sympathy for his old friend, the narrator agreed to come. Aside from his knowledge of Roderick's ancient and distinguished family, the narrator knows very little about his friend. Upon arriving, the narrator describes the Usher family mansion in great detail. focusing on its most fantastic features and its unearthly atmosphere. The narrator notices a thin crack extending from the roof down the front of the house and into the adjacent tarn. Tarn here means a small mountain lake. Shortly after entering, the narrator is greeted by Roderick, who displays a number of strange symptoms. Roderick claims his senses are especially acute, therefore he cannot wear clothes of certain textures or eat particularly flavorful foods. And his eyes are bothered by even the faintest lights. It is revealed that Roderick's sister Madeline is also ill and falls into cataleptic death-like trances. Roderick and Madeline are the only remaining members of the Usher family. Although Poe wrote this short story before the invention of modern psychological science, Roderick Usher's condition can be described according to its terminology. They include a form of sensory overload known as hyperesthesia or hypersensitivity to light, sounds, smells and tastes, and hypochondria, an excessive preoccupation or worry about having a serious illness, and acute anxiety. The narrator is impressed with Roderick's paintings and attempts to cheer him by reading with him and listening to his improvised musical compositions on the guitar. Roderick sings The Haunted Palace, then tells the narrator that he believes the house he lives in to be alive, and that this sentience arises from the arrangement of the masonry and vegetation surrounding it. Further, Roderick believes that his fate is connected to the family mansion. Roderick later informs the narrator that Madeline has died. Fearing that her body will be exhumed for medical study, Roderick insists that she be entombed for 2 weeks in the family tomb located in the house before being permanently buried. The narrator helps Roderick put Madeline's body in the tomb, whereupon the narrator realizes that Madeline and Roderick are twins. The narrator also notes that Madeline's body has rosy cheeks, which sometimes happens after death. Over the next week, both Roderick and the narrator find themselves increasingly agitated. A storm begins, and Roderick comes to the narrator's bedroom in an almost hysterical state. The narrator's bedroom is situated directly above the house's vault where Roderick's sister is entombed. Throwing the windows open to the storm, Roderick points out that the lake surrounding the house seems to glow in the dark, just as Roderick depicted in his paintings, but there is no lightning or other explainable source for the glow. The narrator attempts to calm Roderick by reading aloud from a medieval romance entitled The Mad Tryst. Mad Tryst is a novel involving a knight named Ethelred who breaks into a hermit's dwelling in an attempt to escape an approaching storm, only to find a palace of gold guarded by a dragon. Ethelred also finds a shining brass shield hanging on a wall. Upon the shield is inscribed, "Who enters herein, a conqueror has been. Who slayeth the dragon, the shield he shall win." Ethelred swings his mace at the dragon, which dies with a piercing shriek. When he attempts to take the shield from the wall, it falls to the floor with an unnerving clatter. As the narrator reads of the knight's forcible entry into the dwelling, he and Roderick hear cracking and ripping sounds from somewhere in the house. When the dragon's death cries are described, a real shriek is heard again within the house. As he relays the shield falling from off the wall, A hollow metallic reverberation can be heard throughout the house. At first, the narrator ignores the noises, but Roderick becomes increasingly hysterical. Roderick eventually declares that he has been hearing these sounds for days and that they are being made by his sister, who was in fact alive when she was entombed, and that Roderick Usher knew that she was alive. The bedroom door is then blown open to reveal Madeline, bloodied from her adverse escape from the tomb. In a final fit of rage, she attacks her brother, scaring him to death as she herself expires. Both of them lay dead on the floor, embracing each other. The narrator then runs from the house, and as he does, he notices a flash of moonlight behind him. He turns back in time to see the moon shining through the suddenly widened crack in the house. As he watches, the House of Usher splits in two and fragments sink away into the lake. So that's the plot of the story. Here we are winding up this session. In the next video lesson, we will be having a detailed discussion and analysis of this short story. Thank you.